Well, hello again, and welcome back to this week's edition of our Clean Commercial Transportation Update from our team here at CalSTART and our HVIP team. Really happy to have you back for our fifth week. Very proud of what we've been able to do, but also very mindful that this has been a busy, tumultuous, and very thought-provoking week for all of us. I'm Bill Van Amberg, along with my great colleague and co-host today, Alicia Gildy. We have Bonnie Trowbridge, Whitley Porter, and Casey Okazaka on the controls today. And please, as you have questions or chat or anything, please let us know, and we will try to be responsive during the webcast. We have a really busy rundown this week, so we kind of want to get right to it as best we can. There are a lot of industry news and trends to cover for you quickly. And then we want to talk about the launch of our very exciting and timely Clean Mobility Options program, which we operate with the California Air Resources Board. We'll also have details and observations on a just completed EPA West Coast Clean Fuel Corridor study. Very exciting about what that tells us about the demand that we're seeing there. We'll also look at a new tool that charts demand load around clean fuel vehicles, particularly electrification for the state of California, and how that can help utilities. We'll do a quick scan of what's going on in DC on clean fuel corridors and other efforts out of Congress. And then that sets up a great update extra session today. Alicia Gildy will be leading a half-hour session on clean fuel corridors, the need for them, what it will take to get them going, and really how we can expand clean fuel corridors across the nation. So that's all coming up. However, before we do that, and these are some of the great guests we'll have on our Update Extra coming up, but before we get into any of that in the news, we'd really like to just take a moment here to pause. We really think we must recognize the disturbing past week and a half that we have all faced, and acknowledge really the pent-up anger, anguish, and frustration of Black Americans and Americans of color through what has gone on, not just through the killing of George Floyd, which is just the tip of the iceberg, but institutional racism and how that has affected our nation for way too long. While there's been scattered looting and violence, we really must not get distracted from the real issues and the message of the protests of people we've seen out in the street, and that's over hundreds of years of institutional racism, and also using this as a moment of change. I would reflect that we had a really powerful, very honest, in some cases very disturbing and raw, but great meeting with our staff across all our offices in the nation this week. And it was a moment to just listen and to learn and to acknowledge from our great colleagues who are people who are Black and people of color, their painful stories and their life realities that most of us who have more privilege in the world, if we're honest, don't face. And then from that, to be encouraged to speak and to act. And I would only say that for our organization and for our team, it renewed our deep commitment to our mission at CalSTART, because our mission is clean and healthy air for all. And it's jobs and economic opportunities for all. And it's reducing climate impacts for all. And more than ever, targeting those outcomes, particularly on those people who bear the biggest burden of them. And in this country, that's Black Americans and people of color. So that was our takeaway from the week. We share that moment with you, and interested to hear how you may have responded in your own organizations and in your own lives. So with that, let's move ahead into this busy week, because for our industry, there's an awful lot of things that have gone on, and we'll move right into the news. It's been kind of exciting because up in the air, we've seen the movement of zero emissions technology to the skies. This week, the world's largest zero-emission vehicle aircraft made its first public flight. It's a 9-passenger Cessna. It can actually fly for up to an hour. It took a 30-minute flight. And it's starting to open up a whole new realm of how we could move people around between urban centers and hub to hub. So this is exciting. Secondly, our Drive to Zero program this week unveiled a new study out of our Zero Emission Technology Inventory tool that is showing that zero-emission commercial vehicles in North America should double in number by 2023. Very exciting information, and the full details are on the globaldrivetozero.org website. But one of the things we've seen is that medium-duty trucks Now building on transit is really an area that's starting to grow substantially, taking to the skies on its own, if you will, but also heavy duty trucks. So a lot of growth in this segment. We're seeing this around the world. It's not just something that we see in North America, obviously. A company called Transdev, one of the biggest transit operators in Europe, has just announced that they will, by the end of the year, be deploying 1,200 electric buses across Sweden, Germany, and the Netherlands. Very exciting. Some of those will be fuel cell electric buses, particularly in the Netherlands. We're also seeing some other interesting news with member companies of ours. Nikola, who is involved in fuel cell and battery electric trucks, just completed a major merger that brings $700 million of cash into Nikola to help them build their production facility and get launched. Their first truck will be built actually in Europe and will be a battery electric truck in 2021, with their fuel cell trucks coming in 2023. We're seeing actually also electrification being used for automated vehicles, and an interesting startup out of California called Nuro is expanding tests with taking automated medical supplies from CVS pharmacies to people. It's an interesting test case of this technology. We're also seeing other automated firms doing similarly, and Ford and VW have pooled global assets on automation into a company called Argo AI, and their first platform that they hope to automate will be a ID Buzz. Now, I happen to like this because I had a Volkswagen bus when I was a lot younger than I am today, and this is an interesting vehicle to me, but this will be the commercial version of it that they will use for automated electric delivery. VW, though, is facing other problems. We know about the Dieselgate scandal that has cost them billions of dollars in reparations in the United States and around the world. Now a US federal appeals court has ruled that counties can also go after VW for reparations for excess diesel emissions. This could cost them tens of billions of dollars more. Finally, an interesting story out of Toronto and the Toronto Transit Agency. They have really been thinking about what happens after COVID with transit ridership, which has dropped, and we've all been discussing this. But they found through a transit study that their riders will return, and as they feel increasingly safe of what's going on with the pandemic, they want to return to transit. Very interesting news there. It's also a good reminder that transit is not just necessary, but it's really imperative for so many people as ways to be able to get to work and to have the mobility options that they need in their lives. And that's why we're so excited to have launched this week a whole new program in partnership with the California Air Resources Board, the Shared Use Mobility Center, and others, called Clean Mobility Options. And we're really happy to have Barbara Jacobson, who is our Senior Project Manager with our Innovative Mobility Group, joining us today to give us a rundown of this fantastic launch this week. Barbara, what have you got?
Yeah, thank you so much, Bill. I'm really excited to be here to talk to all of you about the Clean Mobility Options Voucher Pilot Program. As Bill alluded to, we just opened up the window for the Community Transportation Needs Assessments on June 1, and that funding has been fully subscribed. So I'd like to walk through my slides in terms of a high-level overview of the program at large. And I'll get going. Thank you. So this program is a partnership with the Shared Use Mobility Center, Grid Alternatives, and the Local Government Commission, as well as with CARB. So overall, it's a voucher program where we're focusing on zero emissions shared use mobility projects throughout the state of California, focusing on the most underserved communities throughout the state. This is an equity first initiative, and we're really tapping into community-based initiatives and policy changes at the local and the government levels. And we are the administrator along with our partners. So overall, the three values that we really hold true at the core entities of this program for the Community Transportation Needs Assessment is focusing on mobility equity, really engaging with low-income people of color, and focusing on those areas and municipalities that have a historical neglect for transportation funding overall, because transportation is an equity-based lever to pull for economic empowerment and things of that nature. Really focusing on restorative action and restorative justice to ensure that community leaders and residents are at the center of planning initiatives to determine what transportation needs communities need. And then the needs assessment itself is really about engaging with the stakeholders at hand to make sure that the gaps that they identify are being accurately solved. A couple of cool initiatives and proposals that we have as part of the clean mobility options are car sharing, van pool, bike share, scooter share, microtransit, and all focusing on that core initiative of what community stakeholders need. So focusing on that first last mile piece to really engage people to utilize public transit in tandem with getting there on time. And the funding that's available, so as I mentioned, the needs assessment voucher window opened on June 1, and that was for $1 million with a maximum capacity of $50,000 for a transportation needs assessment. And then the mobility project vouchers will open later this year in the fall, and that's for $20 million in funding with up to $1 million per project. So in order for communities to qualify for the mobility project voucher, they need to have already executed a transportation needs assessment, be it from our program or previously within the last 4 years. And this is a map of the eligible communities throughout the state. So as you may be able to tell, it's focusing on the most disadvantaged communities throughout the state in terms of the Cal EnviroScreen 3.0 disadvantaged communities, focusing on affordable housing, AB 1550 low-income communities, and then tribes throughout the state of California. And I forgot to mention, but there, with the mobility project vouchers, there is a $1 million set aside specifically for tribes to ensure that the equity focus is carried throughout the entire program. And these are some of the companies that, the private entities that are in tandem with this program. So part of the initiative is to really be a lever to connect communities with mobility providers to ensure that the operations are successful overall. And it's really, these are some of our high-level goals in terms of ensuring the zero emissions core, because we don't want air quality to be sacrificed in these low-income communities. And I'm happy to answer any questions that y'all may have. This is a pretty high-level overview, but I'd love to hear from you, and I'm really excited to be part of this program.
Barbara, thank you so much, and please reach out to her because it's so interesting, and the program is so deep in terms of all of the different technologies, the variants of mobility that people can try and build into their communities, and our staff is ready to work with people to help them as they make their planning and then put in their proposals. So with that, we'll close out this section of it and move into a whole new section with the theme of the day, Clean Fuel Corridors. Alicia Gildy, please take it away.
Great, thank you, Bill, and great job, Barbara. Yes, as Bill had introduced earlier on in our program, we have a special focus on advancing alternative fuel corridors, and I am super excited to introduce this next segment, which highlights a very important project that CalSTART, in partnership with the United States Environmental Protection Agency and the West Coast Collaborative, developed the Alternative Fuel Infrastructure Corridor Coalition Deployment Strategy Plan. And we have our own Jonathan Norris, who's a senior project manager with CalSTART, who helped with this great project. Give us a quick overview, and then we're going to bring our friend John Mikulin with US EPA to take part in a conversation on why is this project so important and how do we move forward.
Thanks, Alicia. Let's just pull up the slides here. All right, So thanks for that introduction. I wanted to share with you all a recent study that we conducted and a strategic plan that we released, as Alicia mentioned, through our West Coast Collaborative Partnership with the US EPA, along with other coalition partners. Next slide, please. So this study was focused on identifying and prioritizing opportunities to advance medium and heavy duty alternative fuel infrastructure development projects along major corridors throughout California, Oregon, and Washington, corridors in those 3 states. As we see the clean transportation market mature and vehicles are announced with longer ranges, it's crucial to understand where infrastructure could be developed. And that was really the impetus for this study. I want to briefly highlight that it was really a collaborative effort with all of the organizations that you see listed on the screen here, and building that coalition was really key to the success in the project. Next slide. We followed a really good framework for our work. I won't belabor too long on this slide, but that's really just showing you the path that we took to build stakeholder consensus with the coalition members you just saw, and what sort of information we want to gather, how should our study be structured, what sort of questions should be asking, and so on. Next slide. Ultimately, it landed onto a strategic implementation plan that we developed in collaboration with all of those partners. And that study found 147 proposed alternative fuel infrastructure opportunities in all 3 states. You can see here on the left, there's a map of all of the proposals that we received through 2 channels. The first was surveys to targeted partners throughout the region, as well as directed phone calls and other outreach to partners in the region as well. You can also see on, go back please, on the chart on the right-hand side, a breakdown of the infrastructure proposals by fuel type and by state. Next slide. We also wanted to show you a breakdown of some of the estimated capital expenditures that would be expected for these projects. In total, for 141 out of the 147 projects, we estimated a need for $373 million in capital costs. Now, we explained further in the plan document that this is by no means a representation of what we think the total need for these 3 states is going to be. It is only reflective of the 141 proposals that we received and scored, but nevertheless, showing you some good information, as well as average assumptions for capacity and throughput at each one of those stations. Next slide. So there's so much more in the full document. We also put an executive summary together, as well as state-level fact sheets that you can go and download at each one of these links. And I want to turn it over now to John Mikulin, who is the lead on this project. John is a specialist in technology and partnerships at the US EPA in Region 9. And John, I would love for you to tell the audience a little bit more on why this study was important and what the future of corridor work on the West Coast will look like in the future.
Well, thank you, Jonathan, Alicia, Bill, the entire CalSTART team for a partnership on this project. Again, hello, everyone. I'm John Mikulin. I work for US EPA. I'm stationed in our Region 9 office, which is typically in San Francisco. I haven't been there for a while, but that's where I usually spend the majority of my waking life. First off, again, I just want to thank the CalSTART team for all the support over the last several years as we've developed this project. And, we really started vetting this with our state partners over 3 years ago, really in late 2016, when the FAST Act in Section 1413 of the Fixing America's Surface Transportation Act began to be implemented by the Federal Highway Administration. And for those not familiar with that statute, it directs DOT to designate corridors for the fuel technologies that are covered under the AFIC planning scope, so plug-in EV charging, hydrogen, propane, and natural gas for CNG and LNG. So in our partnership with FHWA, we wanted to align our planning scope with theirs. And, I think that partnership has been very fruitful in bringing a lot of other agencies and organizations to the table and supporting the need for medium and heavy duty alternative fuel infrastructure as a key condition for market development of these low and zero emission drivetrain technologies. And obviously for EPA, we've had a long-standing commitment to diesel emission reductions. And have had funding authority to support partnership development and technology advancement in that space. But our funding is limited only to vehicles and equipment. One of the key and chronic barriers to implementation of large-scale diesel to alternative fuel projects has been our inability to fund infrastructure along with vehicle replacements and deployments. So looking at the statutory directive for DOT and the work that our Northeast Diesel Collaborative partners had embarked upon with DOT in the past, we kind of took that model and built upon it with help from CalSTART. And that's what you see in the product that Jonathan just briefed you on. I encourage you to go online and look into the details of what we were able to find with this phase 1 analysis. So moving forward, I think what we're hoping to do is to highlight the process that we were able to construct and execute over the 3-year period in implementing this partnership, encourage other regions of the country to replicate it and address their own local and regional needs. And then also to just highlight the demand for these technologies nationwide and the ability to forge robust public-private partnerships to support technology development on the ground in communities that cannot be outsourced. Infrastructure projects are really difficult to outsource because they happen on the ground in our cities, in our states, in our communities, and they benefit high-paying jobs, high-quality jobs that benefit local economic development, skills development, and also, obviously for my purposes, public health and the environment. So I encourage you all to look more into the effort, to follow efforts this year with surface transportation funding at DOT, which is part and parcel to this moving forward. And of course, as always, I see many familiar names on the participant list here. Many of you know how to find me. Feel free to give me a call, drop me an email. We're looking to carry this forward and expand the scope of what we're able to do on advanced, medium, heavy-duty powertrains for the benefit of all Americans. Thanks.
Great job, John. Thank you so much. So great to have you, and please stay tuned for our update extra this afternoon. We want you to be a part of that conversation, John. You've been wonderful to work with, and Jonathan, great job. Thank you so much. All right, next up, I would love to introduce our colleague, Jordan Steen, who has developed an infrastructure heat map. And this is really the result of a great collaborative effort of our infrastructure working group in the state of California, focusing on advancing zero-emission infrastructure in the state. So Jordan, if you can give us a quick walkthrough on why this is an important tool for our stakeholders to have access to.
Sure. Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for that great introduction, Alicia. As Alicia said, my name is Jordan Steen. I'm a project manager at CalSTART, and I've been the lead engineer on this infrastructure heat map project that we've been working on. So what you can see kind of behind you, behind the backdrop, is a screenshot of the infrastructure heat map. There's a lot going on, a lot of colors and shapes and overlays. So I'm going to quickly walk through all of the features that are important and give some ways that you can use the heat map to get useful information. Next slide, please. So one of the main features of the heat map that we decided to add was, instead of using individual points to represent vehicles or infrastructure demands, we're using clusters. So basically what that means is it gives you a more granular look at the information depending on what level you want to look at. And it follows you, the granularity follows the view that you're looking at. So on the left, the smaller picture, you can see that a larger view of the greater Los Angeles area. And you can get good information on the energy demands from medium and heavy duty vehicles in the entire region. But then if you're more interested specifically on the Los Angeles city and the South LA region, it'll just take a click to zoom in more, and you'll still get information that pertains to that specific area that you're looking at. So regardless of where you're trying to look, you'll always get good, correct information on that. And the numbers represented inside of the circles, which I'll be referring to as clusters, is the kilowatt demands from charging for all of the medium and heavy duty vehicles in that area. Next slide, please. Great. So another thing that we've added is a utility overlay. So what this lets you do is see which utility is going to be responsible for providing the information for the vehicles. So as you can see with that about 4,400 kilowatt cluster that's over the East Bay and Sacramento area, there's a couple different utilities that clump of energy is going to fall into, but using the zoom and this overlay, you can see specifically where that energy demand is going to be. Next slide, please. So this is just a zoomed in version of what we looked at before. Just a couple clicks will take you from where we were to where we are now. And you can see specifically, which of the clusters of energy demand are going to fall specifically into SMUD, into PG&E, and into the Roseville Local Utility District. Next slide, please.
Jordan, we're going to have to speed things up, my friends, and maybe we'll get to this next slide. Oh, no, you're doing great.
Yeah, so for the sake of time, I won't go through how we got to all of this, but we have a couple of different filters so you can get rid of the information that you're not specifically looking for, because there is a lot going on. So we have a vocation selector. You can pick the vocations that you're interested in. We have a projected months till on-road filter, so you can slide those bars to look at either short-term or long-term infrastructure needs. And then we have a vehicle class selector, which you can choose large vehicles, small vehicles, anything in between, whatever's pertinent to what you're looking for. Next slide, please.
I think we have gotten people wanting all kinds of questions, Jordan.
Okay, I've seen a lot of.
But so if we could encourage folks to reach out to Jordan, Alicia, and the team on this with questions, happy to chat more and figure out how we make this an even better tool.
Yeah, any feedback would be great. Yeah, thanks for the time, everyone.
All right, thank you, Jordan. And why don't we really quickly bring up our policy director, who is joining us, Kyle Winslow from Washington, D.C. this morning, actually this afternoon for him. And Kyle, why don't we very quickly, if we could just talk about two things. What's going on in Congress that will have an impact on clean fuel corridors and some of our other campaigns. And then let's just give a snapshot capsule because we're almost out of time today.
Sure. Thanks, Bill. And it's good to be with everyone today. Yeah, so this week we saw the Surface Transportation Bill released by House Transportation and Infrastructure Committee under Chairman DeFazio. And that really relates to all three of our federal campaigns that we can quickly run through, but really relates to the corridors under federal highway that we were just talking about, and some of our transit recommendations under FTA. So I can dive into a little bit more detail on where these campaigns are, but I think we're waiting to see as Congress moves forward on the markup, which is scheduled for 2 weeks from Wednesday, so the 17th of this month. They're going to quickly move through committee action on these different provisions where we have recommendations that are relevant to FTA and to federal highway. We're going to try to plug in some of our recommendations from our different coalitions, which we've already sent to the Hill through letters of support from various members of CalSTART. See what progress we can make there, and then continue to plug in with the committee process as we track Senate EPW's version of the bill, how that's conferenced with this version, and Senate Banking, which hasn't yet introduced the bill. And so this is a 5-year, $494 billion piece of legislation that we've seen come out of House Transportation and Infrastructure this week, and it's pretty significant.
All right. So Kyle, I think in the interest of time, and I hate to say this, but let's bring you back next week and let's talk about our three campaigns. I don't think we have time to walk through them now, but we are doing a clean fuel corridor campaign. We have a zero emission bus campaign, and also innovative mobility. And then our final one is around zero emission trucks for incentives, infrastructure, and advanced tech improvement. So let's bring Kyle back next week and we'll talk about those campaigns and their progress. But good news that there is an instrument moving forward that could actually provide funding to at least 2 of them right now. And we'll be working that as a team and with our members. Thank you, Kyle.
Thank you.
All right, so I think, Alicia, we had one quick poll that was going to set up what we want to do with our next half hour. So if you'd like to walk through that.
Sure, great. Thank you so much, Bill. Yes, so as we get into our next segment on our Update Extra. We're talking about the advancement of alternative fuel corridors. We want to know from you, what do we need to do to advance alternative fuel corridors? Do we need to improve education awareness? Do we need more funding and incentives? How about public and private partnerships? Stakeholder coordination? And then lastly, how about smart policies? All right, we'll give it about 5-10 seconds and then we'll pull up those results. Bill, I'm really looking forward to our Update Extra, and I'm hoping everybody will continue on until noon for a really good conversation with 3 really good friends that are going to tell us why it's important we advance alternative fuel corridors.
And really timely now too, with the funding
Oh, yeah.
potentially coming.
Absolutely, absolutely. All right, let's see those results. Okay, and it looks like we're going to need funding and incentives. Thank you very much, and good work to our friend Kyle, who's been working on some important policy campaigns to help us get as much funding as possible to support corridor development. Thank you for your participation, everyone.
All right. Well, thank you, Alicia. And really quickly, we'll move on to complete our program today. Next steps for next week, we're going to have Kyle Winslow back, and you can certainly see, you can reach out to him if you have information. Next week, we'll also be introducing our new Senior Director for Trucks, who is joining our team. We have a HTUF webinar series and also a really interesting webinar with LI Cycle, which is looking at the supply chain for battery materials. We also have HTUF webinar series that's kicking off, and also one on electric shuttles. So please, as you can see that, CalSTART events, you can certainly register to take part in those. So an exciting week coming up, a difficult week in the past. For now, for those of you who can stay with us, as Alicia said, please do. And in just a moment, after a brief pause, we'll actually be, and stay on the webcast, we'll be moving into our Update Extra session on clean fuel corridors, and a great dialogue, great guest panelist with us. For those who have to leave us right here at the half hour, we understand that. Thanks for staying more connected than ever for us. For Alicia Gildy and our Clean Commercial Transportation team, really thanks again. Be safe, stay safe and healthy, and remember, the future is ours to write. Thank you for joining us this week. Goodbye for now.